Ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So I got the list and I looked at it, and I just want you to be honest with me. Like, how many times the past month did you say to yourself, "This company's raising that much for that"? Because I counted at least like 2 or 3 of them, and that was just Monday morning.
It's been a really interesting month. I'm sure we're going to get into it here in a little bit, but yeah, fundraising this month has been. I have some notes. We'll definitely get into it. It's been an interesting month though.
Well, as our the great philosopher and musical genius JT, aka Justin Timberlake, would say, it's gonna be May. Oh, that was bad. Bad dad joke.
That was bad.
Terrible dad joke.
We're in
Oh,
a dad joke and friendly environment here, so
I know.
I welcome
Totally.
it. I can learn a
And
lot.
there goes the show.
You can't replace part of the brain. Like,
you treat them the same.
Source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the prophets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the $90 billion company that helped up high. A lot of things.
The State of Medtech with your host, Omar M. Khatib.
Welcome back to the show. Our second installment of This Month in MedTech in partnership with our trusted market intel partners and team over at LSI, joined by the great, the powerful Nick Talamantes, head of intel over at LSI. Nick, good to see you as always.
Thank you, Omar, for once again another over-the-top intro and welcome. It's good to be back and looking forward to having a conversation with you about This Month in MedTech.
Absolutely. So on the docket today, we're going to do the macro month overview, some trending headlines, some really interesting ones there. Deals and dollars, May's biggest moves. So we're going to go through some interesting funding that came through in May, a little bit of a category deep dive, a little, some foreshadowing, Neuromod's on the rise. And then we're going to round things out with some strategic and structural shifts that you need to know about. And of course, some closing insights. So Nick, kind of take us away. Like, what happened on a macro level for the month of May?
Yeah, I feel like overall, if the theme of April was uncertainty and, what's going to happen in terms of the macroeconomic environment, both in the United States and worldwide, things have sort of settled out a little bit more. May was a good month. I'm going to just say it. May was a good month overall when you look at deals, when you look at M&A activity, when you look at some of the announcements from some of the major strategics in the industry. It was a good month. What's your vibe check on it, though?
I think there's some interesting headlines we'll get into in a moment where there's certain strategics that spun out certain divisions that to me were really surprising. Obviously, one of the bigger ones were some like interesting leadership changes. I think, Intuitive is one of the few companies that has a leadership change on the CEO side where I'm like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's like a good sign. So congratulations to Dave Rosa over at Intuitive, who will be taking over the helm, I think in July. Mm-hmm. But overall, like, I thought May was interesting, mainly because of as you guys indicated in the reports, there's this big shift going on towards like Neuromod and digital diagnostics. And then more importantly, at least on the bigger like healthcare landscape, there's a lot of AI that's coming out. But, aside from that, there's like a lot of fraud as well. Not so much in our industry, but like as an example, and maybe I can pull this up. But have you been seeing like some of the AI stuff going on in like other industries and what's been happening?
Please regale me on it. I kind of might suspect where this is going, but for the audience.
Let me pull this up from like the greatest venture capital firm in the world, Jabroni Capital, run by Jack Kuvek. But they had this fantastic meme today. So the original everyone loved was FTX, and the remake that nobody cared about was apparently Builder AI, was a $1.5 billion AI company that reportedly used no actual AI. Goes belly up. What they were doing was they were essentially using like a massive like back-end Indian development team to do everything. So I see stuff like that and I just wonder, like, I think the guardrails in our industry keep things safe. Like, I don't think we're going to see fraud at that level in healthcare, but like, who knows? Because like, look, healthcare, if you think about it, is close to like I think $6 trillion industry, $7 trillion industry, and it's not like one massive industry. It's
Right.
made up of like multiple $billion industry. So when there's a lot of money, you're gonna have some bad actors. But I think there's gonna be a lot of innovation on the AI side. Not to like spoil it for everybody, but like I see that, and I just wonder. I'm like, okay, at some point, something's gonna end up coming through. But I think that's sort of the good thing about healthcare is that we have really high barrier to entry, so most scammers and fraudsters just don't want to go through the trouble or the work.
Yeah, I hope we have no Elizabeth Holmes in the medtech AI. I hope I'm not throwing too much shade there, but we don't need any of that in our industry. We're a humble industry that's just here to improve patient lives. So
Yeah, but like I'll comment on this for a second, which
yeah.
is it is good we are humble, but I feel like we need to be a little bit less humble. And the reason why, so talking about it like a shift, is
Mhm.
that if you think about it, some of the smartest people, like coming out of college and everything, they're not going into medtech. And some
Mhm.
of the most like dynamic investors, money, etc., is not going into medtech. That's why I think LSI serves such an important part of that ecosystem to bring in new money.
Mhm.
I'm really excited about LSI Asia and Singapore. I'll be there. I know you guys have your European event, and in Europe, like for those who may not know him, Harry Stebbings, who's a big name in the tech world as a VC, is going to be keynoting. So all those things are really good, but I think we got to find other ways to like market the industry so that people who are young and smart and ambitious are like, man, I can make a boatload of money in medtech, but then also do something for like society that I can be really proud
Yeah,
of
solve
versus
those societal issues.
a chat GPT wrapper that like, I don't know, does like automatic messaging on like X or something.
Right, right. Yeah. Something a little more practical, a little more tangible that'll make us feel good, a little better at the end of the day. Definitely agree.
Yeah. On the macro side, something I kind of want to get your take on. Like
Yeah.
there were like, some quiet things that happened, and then there's like loud things. One of the loud things was like Medtronic divesting their diabetes division, which was
Yeah.
like a huge shock. Like I did not like I mean, should we be shocked about that? Like I kind of surprised about that, to be honest with you.
You know, yeah, it's definitely a shocking headline grabbing piece of industry news, but it's not even really the first this year. I think the first time I was like, wow, that's really interesting. What's going on there was the Stryker um, sale to the PE firm.
Oh,
Totally
to
blanking on it.
Visogli brothers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was going to totally butcher that, so thank you for the save there. Yeah, that I thought that was a really shocking, headline, and that was a couple of months ago now.
Yeah,
So
because they're working on a spine robot, but yet they
yeah,
got rid of their spine division.
yeah, they keep
Right.
the
So that's
spine
kind of
robot,
interesting.
but yeah, it's interesting moves that we're seeing, and so I see, and I've read a lot of, and we've even commented on this briefly in the numbers. We did a whole issue last week on it. It's a really good business within Medtronic. There are opportunities for both the new company and Medtronic as a result of this, seemingly. But we'll see kind of how things play out once the divestment happens fully and the new company is stood up.
Yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting. But like with the diabetes division of Medtronic spinning out, like, what do you think that signals, I guess, to the rest of the market?
If we're looking broadly at the medtech market, what I think it signals is strategic organizations like Medtronic or Stryker looking to just focus their portfolios. If you look at how the diabetes business operated within Medtronic and compare it to the rest of the business, it's very different. And there are, yeah, it's a thriving business within Medtronic, but it has some operational differences that I think have maybe constrained some of that growth, made it less competitive. And if you look at the other competitors in the diabetes space, specifically on the insulin pump side, they've been kind of taking Medtronic's lunch money in the diabetes space. So hopefully this move will allow the new company to be a bit more competitive again. They have a great ecosystem for diabetic devices. And they're a great innovator in this space as well. So I hope all of these things kind of result in good for both companies.
Yeah. And what about like, I guess on the public markets, we talked about it earlier with some companies that are essentially doing pretty well. You want to share some of those that came on your radar?
Yeah, we did a bit of a quarter one roundup. I think we were a little late to the game and providing some commentary, but hey, it's still good timely data, and we got to bring in the LSI market intel layer as well, which I think our readership appreciates. So overall, it looked like it was a strong quarter for the medtech industry, and that's in spite of some of the macroeconomic uncertainties that we've been seeing. I think the main takeaway from our article there was that the industry continues to thrive. Like, this is a vital industry when you look at other different industries, and it's a little more resilient than some of those other industries that we compete against, even though we are a small but mighty, what is it, $660 billion medtech market, something like that.
Yeah. That's at least from my queries to GPT, because I did a keynote last week. That's essentially what I was told, is that 660 billion.
GPT is probably looking at the LSI data that comes out of, I'm thinking that's coming out of Compass, if I'm recalling my numbers correctly. But
I think you are correct. That's probably where I got it, because
I don't know how the GPT is seeing our data, but I'm okay with the promotion, I suppose.
just to make sure everyone is cool at LSI. The way that happened is that I was using a GPT that Henry had trained. It's a private one, and he gave me access to it to try it. So your data is not like getting leaked out to GPT on a public thing. So
at least not to our knowledge. We don't know what some of our other, who knows what everyone who has access to the data is doing with it, but they may not be as savvy at training GPT models.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely easier said than done,
Yeah.
So kind of moving forward, like, let's get into the trending headlines. Like, we covered Medtronic spinning off its diabetes business, which, by the way, is a $2.5 billion business.
Yeah.
And I don't know about the details. Like, is that diabetes business going to spin off into its own, like, publicly traded stock?
Yeah.
You buying that stock? We're not financial advisors, by the way. Don't take advice from us.
This is not financial advice. I think I would probably be a hold on it, at least to start. Let's just see how they do. Like I said, the research that we did as part of our work for the numbers last week makes it seem like Medtronic got its work cut out for it, but under the leadership that they have in the diabetes division, and with their existing portfolio, and with their sort of track history for innovation in diabetes, it could be that this is the right move for the company. But I'm not much of an investor either. This is where I'd lean on you for any insights. That's not financial advice.
Yeah, it's going to depend, actually, because their competition out there is what? Abbott, Tandem.
Yeah.
So the diabetes side is like a lot closer to like a B2C product, right? Mm-hmm. And there's like a whole user experience and everything. I think that's going to be like really important. And then also, to be honest with you, the marketing on the education side. So which one of these companies does such a good job that, when a patient needs one of those devices, they, opt for like a certain company, right? So I think that's gonna say a lot. Plus, like, some of the more complex things in terms of like the contracts they have that really optimize for distribution. We'll see. And here's the thing, is that, like, again, I don't know much on the commercial side of diabetes, but like Medtronic, like any strategic, probably does some kind of bundling or some kind of contract that makes it optimal for them to drive adoption of technology. So when you spin off a division like this, it's on its own. It doesn't have like these huge bundle contracts, right? So it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, I think the advantage that Medtronic or the new co will still retain is the fact that they are the only company, to my knowledge, that does both the glucose monitoring and insulin delivery effectively in a connected ecosystem. So that is, I would say, something of a strategic advantage that they have. But there are some interesting things that I've read on patient preference for devices that I see a lot of good commentary on Insulet's devices and I believe it's Tandem, that patients prefer those devices. That it's going to be tough. That's going to be a challenge for Medtronic or Nuco.
Right. And then speaking of Insulet, isn't Ashley McEvoy, former J&J, she's now the new president and CEO over at Insulet.
Yeah.
So
tell me, I'm less dialed in on the executive side, but I know that you talk to a lot of people, Omar. Have you any insights there on what that leadership change means?
Yeah, let's just put it this way without like revealing any sources, but I spoke to a few people who are high up the chain as executives at other large strategics, and overall they think that that's going to be a success, right? They spoke highly of Ashley in terms of like what she was able to accomplish over at J&J. And just for those who don't know, she served, prior to being she was the executive vice president for worldwide chairman for J&J Medtech. Prior to that, she was the company group chairman for their vision and diabetes care side. So it'll be interesting to see. It'll be very, very interesting to see. The other side of it, like we talked about, kind of like sort of a loud, sort of newsworthy thing, which was Medtronic spinning off their diabetes business. Something that I didn't know about until I read it through LSI's materials was ResMed's acquisition of VirtuOx. So
that was an interesting acquisition that I think also kind of falls in line with what we've been seeing in the M&A space, at least from the corporate strategic side, which is tuck-in acquisitions that complement their existing portfolios. This one in particular is going to be really helpful in getting patients who have specifically sleep disorders diagnosed more rapidly so that they can get to an appropriate therapy delivery more expediently without falling off, because that's a big hurdle within the sleep disorder management market, is the time to diagnose. I think it historically was like sometimes upwards of 6 months to go through all the sleep studies that you needed to do to confirm that you have some type of OSA or other type of apnea, and then get the appropriate treatment. You lose potential patients there. And now with technology like the VirtuOx acquisition, you can do this in a fraction of the time. I believe it's like a week now is what it takes to go from coming in to see your physician and to getting diagnosed with a sleep disorder and then receiving the therapy that you need. So great acquisition. It was a good month overall for M&A, I believe.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see. Like, ResMed's a really great example, I think, of a company that's trying to acquire what they can to essentially build like sort of a one-stop shop for sleep, where you can think of it as like the operating system for sleep. Just as an example, is that they've become such good experts at head strap devices because they sell CPAP. Let me bring it up on screen. Like, one of the things that didn't happen this past month, but I remember I saw it on LinkedIn a month or two ago, was that I'm actually logged into Apple right now, and ResMed has the Contour head strap. So essentially, for the Apple Vision Pros, ResMed partnered with Apple to design a better head strap. And the reason why I mention that is it just shows that the company's propensity and ability to do things on the consumer side. And so, I'm kind of waiting to see, does ResMed make an acquisition in the wearable market? You have companies like Aura and Whoop out there who, granted, their devices are used for monitoring activity and, so many other things, but like, I'm an N of one, but everything I've read online and plus a lot of people I talk to, I always ask, like, why did you get like your, Whoop device or your Aura ring? And everybody starts because of their interest in improving their sleep and then HRV. And so at some point, like, does ResMed make an acquisition of some kind of wearable so that they can monitor sleep and, find ways to improve it, upsell the consumer on things, even if they don't have like a pathological disease, but then use that as, let's say, remote monitoring. They did acquire a remote I guess sleep apnea diagnostic company like a year or two ago, is an Israeli one. I can't remember the name of it, right? But I'm wondering if they just start to expand that footprint in those different areas.
No, that'd be a really sensible thing to do. I'll add to your N of one here and make it an N of two. I was actually having a conversation with my neighbors this past weekend about why they love their Whoop device, and the thing that they really focused on was the sleep information that the device was pulling in. And I wonder if we could see something like that be used to, one, catch sleep disorders earlier so that you can do the necessary intervention, but two, just, as you said, provide that continuous remote feedback for patients with diagnosed sleep disorders to just better manage and see how they're doing on their devices that they're using to manage.
Yeah, and it makes sense. Like, look, if you go to ResMed's website and go down to their product list, they have it. So you go there, you click on products, and then the products are based on problem categories, which I'm a big fan of. So you have sleep apnea, snoring, insomnia, right? So over time, like, do they start adding things like restless leg syndrome, right? There's a company out there that's focused on that. Do they add things just like, I mean, maybe not insomnia, but like difficult sleeping, So like, do they introduce other things that are going to help capture more of those patients earlier on and then get them into the ResMed ecosystem, similar to like how Apple works?
Yeah.
No,
what I think, if I were to talk about what I'd like to see, is I'd like to see them look at supporting alternative interventions to CPAP. And I know that CPAP is their big business. However, I also know, especially I think it's NovaResp, they've developed a software technology to improve compliance with CPAPs. And I think that is a fantastic way to approach it. But I do know that there are other ways of treating obstructive sleep apnea that I think it would be fascinating to see them kind of branch out and just become, like you said, the sleep operating system, and really focus in on offering alternative solutions and different solutions for these sleep disorders.
Totally. Like, look, like, it might sound crazy, but like, not everybody is a candidate for CPAP mask.
Yeah.
And so for people who aren't, like, what do you provide to them? I mean, even something, this is going to sound crazy. And again, like, I have no idea, the margins on this might not be that high, but, getting into areas like for people who have, let's say, sinus issues, or they need to wear like those sleep tape over their nose to increase the size of their nostrils, sleep tape over the mouth to help like with which by the way is a real pain, because it's like a disposable, right? But I was thinking if somebody came up with some kind of device or something that's you pay a premium for but you can use every night. There's actually I can't remember the name of it. There's a company that creates like what looks like a stent catheter, but it goes into it's like $600 though. It goes into your nose and expands and stays in there at night rather than using the sleep tape. Right? So like, I'm just wondering, like, does ResMed go into these different areas to offer the consumer? Like, I don't know. It would be interesting for them to really go hard at the category sleep and own it, because I think that if you look at consumer behavior around longevity, it's coming down to like, live longer and everything, but it's boiled down to like two key things: improving sleep and decreasing stress as much as possible, right? And sort of the bridge that ties those two things together is heart rate variability, or HRV, and so like, it would be interesting. It would be interesting if and this is why, like, I'm very bullish on ResMed, because I want to see more companies like ResMed exist. I don't want to see companies get like, there's some companies that make sense for them to get acquired, right? Like shout out to Hamed, who's a really great founder over at the
NovaResp.
NovaResp. Sorry, yes, we're talking about all these NovaResp, but like, it makes sense for NovaResp to build up their traction and be an acquisition target, right? But there are other companies, and I'll throw one out there that me personally, I was kind of sad to see get acquired. It was like Inari getting acquired by Stryker. I kind of wanted to see Inari to continue to grow and like be this owner of all things like peripheral vascular, So
I agree. I think there's we don't want too much consolidation, right? There's something interesting
no,
in
because then look, these strategics are spinning things
eventually
off
goes the
to
other way,
begin with.
right? Yeah, exactly.
Like there's for every strategic who makes a phenomenal acquisition, like Stryker acquiring Mako, great acquisition. It was painful. It was very, very messy, but like they've scaled that and made it work. But then for every one of those, there's so many other acquisitions where like, I'm not going to mention any names because I don't want to be a jerk. Maybe I will be. But like,
it's for the after hours.
Yeah, for the after those, those are the podcasts I record. Those, Henry Peck and I every now and then will have a call after I put my kid to sleep that'll last anywhere from 2 to 3 hours, and they are like they're practically after hour podcasts that are not recording of us just riffing on things in the industry. But yeah, like there's a few strategics this past year who had made acquisitions of really cool tech and have like shelved them because they just just yeah. So
what's going on there?
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's continue to move on. Any other trending headlines we want to cover before we move on?
Yeah. I'll touch on one. It's a bit of a teaser. I guess by the time this comes out, it won't be so much of a teaser.
Tease it.
The next edition of the numbers, which will be out by the time most people can see this, is actually going to be on another kind of industry headline, which was Boston Scientific basically shuttering their heart valves business. They've announced they're no longer in the heart valve space. I don't want to say they're not in the structural heart space, since I believe they still have a left atrial appendage closure device that's doing quite well. But heart valves, no more with Boston Scientific. So it was an interesting news. I did have to ask myself, or remind myself, they were in that market. They were in the TAVR market. But they had a very small market share, and they've decided to just kind of close that off, as you've said. And I believe it was actually an acquisition, just kind of segueing in and tying things together here. These acquisitions that what's going on. They acquired this heart valve, aortic valve business a few years ago, and announced this week, I believe, that that's no more. They're out of that space. So it's all for Medtronic and Edwards to continue to dominate.
Yeah, and just for people to understand, like a little context here, like there's really intense competition with you can call them like as entrenched leaders. So like the two big ones were essentially, Edwards Life Sciences and then Medtronic. So Edwards had the Sapien series, Medtronic had Core Valve and Evolute, and then Boston Sci had Lotus Edge. And I'm sure I think it was a good product, but it just struggled to gain meaningful traction. I think the problem is that physicians were sort of already familiar and comfortable with the other competitor platforms. Aside from like strong clinical data and like long-term safety outcomes, you have to keep in mind that like physicians are not inherently innovative people, and for good reason, because like if you're super innovative and you're trying all kinds of new things, you might kill somebody, right? So for every like one early adopter who's willing to switch or try something new, you have like 100 other people who are not switching because there's high cost of switching, not just to the patient, but also these days with how complex it is to get things in the hospital, there's political skin involved, there's all kinds of stuff. And so I think it's just really difficult. So when you have incumbents that build like a really strong clinical and economic moat, it's hard to disrupt that. And my read on that, Nick, is that for the innovators and founders listening, is if you're going to go and try and disrupt like a market and grab market share, don't play by somebody else's rules and game and come out with like a quote unquote competitive product. It needs to be something like radically different. And just go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's great. We need more Omar insights on how companies can come in and be disruptive. I think you have a great insight into those kind of strategies.
Yeah. Well, like I'll give you one that I saw at the American Urology Association. Okay, so that is Intuitive's meeting. They own it. Okay, so I walked around, and what did I see? I saw a lot of companies that, there are some companies that were trying to do like robotic stuff. Terrible idea. You're not going to beat Intuitive at that. But the companies that stood out to me where I was like, okay, this is like a a massive opportunity. One was Profound Medical. So they are publicly traded. Disclosure, I own stock in that company because after I read more about them and I read their captain study, I was like, oh, I gotta buy stock in this thing because I thought it was undervalued. So they essentially have a robotic platform that goes through the urethra, and they use I'm gonna mess up the term here. I think it's ultrasonic waves, but essentially they use some type of ultrasonic waves to disrupt the tumor, and so there's no cutting, no incision involved, and then the tumor, the prostate is essentially ablated, right? But without it making any cuts. And I feel like I need to do a better job of saying so it's essentially they do incision free ablative intervention. Okay.
Right.
So the way you want to think about it is that their probe is placed in robotically through the urethra. They do it in an MRI, so there's imaging involved, so you can actually
in real time
get the margins right. And then that prostate, it is essentially, that tissue is essentially absorbed by the body. No incisions made. Great. Another one that actually came, sort of stood on my radar was like Histosonics. Histosonics uses histotripsy, where essentially these are like little tiny bubbles like in space. And so they can penetrate tissue without making an incision, use these little bubbles to disrupt any cancerous tissue, and it's gone. Right. So like those are the kind of things that like you see and you're like, okay, that's going to like disrupt the market.
Yeah.
But, going into an existing market with like a product that's like marginally better, I mean,
a better mousetrap.
It's just tough, man. It's just tough. Like, when you have a better mousetrap, like there's something to be said about doing things that are extremely different that stand out, because that gets attention. When you get attention, you're able to channel it and then convert people, and more importantly, change behaviors, right?
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that people have to keep in mind, and I think this is like to kind of bring this full circle, going back to the Boston Scientific thing, is that if they can look at your product and compare it to something else, you're in trouble. Because you're just going to lose. You're playing by somebody's other game. But like, how do you compare like a platform like Profound Medical or Histosonics to Da Vinci? You can't. Like, they're two different things,
Yeah.
So I think that's the key there,
That's really that's interesting.
Yeah. So moving on, let's see on the docket here. So we covered our trending headlines. You ready to do? I think this is our most beloved segment, deals and dollars.
Yeah.
Who doesn't like money?
Episode 2, our most beloved segment.
Our most beloved. Yeah. Our most beloved. So let me just kind of roll through these real quick for the listeners.
Sure.
And actually I'll bring it up on screen for those who are watching on YouTube. Here we go. All right, let's take a look at this. All right, so we got 9 deals. We got Hilo did a Series B wearable for the monitoring of systolic and diastolic blood pressure at 42 mil. Sidekick did some debt financing. Digital Therapeutics for chronic conditions at 35 mil. VirtuOx, there's an M&A, so intraoperative laparoscopic lens cleaner to maintain clear vision during minimally invasive surgery. So this was an acquisition.
So it looks like there's a bit of a graphical issue here. I think that is actually ClearCam that did that. The technology there. The VirtuOx is, as we talked about earlier in the ResMed section, they have effectively a diagnostic for chronic disorders. So little typo there on the LSI team. Analyst curated. We're just
good. All good. That's why we do these recorded.
Yeah.
No, all right. So kind of rolling through, we got ClearPoint.
Yeah.
At 110 million, which is surgical guidance and navigation for neurosurgery. We have InBrain Neuroelectronics. They got a grant. So InBrain was really interesting. That's led by Carolina. So they're essentially graphene based. So graphene is this like very, very thin, extremely strong material. Really cool to see that being used. Cosm Medical is undisclosed, but I know their CEO and founder, he was working really hard. So congrats to them. They're a custom made gynecological prosthetic for pelvic floor disorders.
Mhm.
And then we got Sensionics raising 75 mil, long-term implantable continuous glucose monitor. Again, like the good thing about seeing all this is that there is money out there. I think that was a big concern, is that there's not enough money. There's money out there, and I think that coming out of the election into this year, the M&A market's getting better. And I think, again, going back to Lena Khan not being the head of the FTC, it gives a lot of confidence to investors that like, hey, we can fund this, and then there's a path to acquisition. Alpheus Medical raising a Series B at 52 million. It's a sonodynamic therapy for the treatment of solid tumors. We have Oath, who raised a seed of 10 million. They're an AI-powered operating system for outpatient surgical centers. That's a really interesting one for me. And then rounding things out, and Nick, I want to hear if you have a few that you really liked or stood out. We got Salvia Bioelectronics raising a $60 million Series B minimally invasive Neuromod system designed to treat chronic migraine. EBR raising 36.1 million, which is a leadless implantable pacing device for left ventricular stimulation and the treatment of heart failure. And finally, we got Surgify raising a $7.9 million Series A, which is a bone cutting device for soft tissue preservation. So now that we kind of round out the deals and the dollars, Nick, which babies do you love the most?
Well, we first got to give credit where it's due. This was just a snapshot of deal flow activity in May, and the month is still not over yet. I was actually looking back in preparation for our call today, and I think when we last met, episode 1, we talked about how April was kind of a down month, and within the course of a week after recording, there was 10 plus deals that were closed, several hundred million just added.
Nick,
right
it's
in.
because the people listen to the show and they're like, we gotta infuse more capital into the markets. That's why. That's what happens.
It was the Warren Buffett advice.
Look, listen, I'm only speculating here, but we talked about Medtronic spinning off their diabetes division. You know when that technically happened? That happened the same week we released the infamous and the crowd loving Ray Cohen interview that we did at LSI, where towards the end he went on an amazing tangent talking about Medtronic and the lawsuit that he ended up winning while at Exonics. So who knows? That could have been a factor. But let's get back to the deals and dollars. What are some deals that you like and why?
Yeah, I think some that really grabbed my attention, coming back to your Histologics comment, Alpheus is doing something similar where they're effectively using ultrasound to disrupt and deliver drug to really aggressive, frankly, the most aggressive form of glioblastoma. And right now the outcomes are horrendous for patients who have this disease because, one, it comes back, it's super aggressive. And I believe the 5-year mortality rate is extremely high, if not the highest among all forms of cancer. No great drug treatments. Love to see that a device is being looked at as a way to enhance pharmaceutical efficacy and improve patient outcomes here. So I want to just call that one out as perhaps my favorite. And then maybe I can give a second one, but I'll let you go. What's the standout for Omar for the month?
So for me, I have a bias to things that are really, really hard and complex.
Yeah.
And so I can't help. And again, it's not the funding amount, but I will say ClearPoint Neuro is really interesting. So ClearPoint Neuro, real-time MRI surgical navigation for neurosurgery. The reason why it's interesting to me is that I see this for a few things. One, as a category leadership play. So, neurosurgical navigation is extremely high barrier, very, very high precision, and it's a very, very niche area with a few clear a few players. Like if I talk to the average medtech person, I say, who are some players in the ortho space? I can name some, but in the neurosurgical space, it's not exactly clear, right?
Right.
The pun there. That was
I was
bad.
thinking it,
That was
but you
bad.
know, we're at our
That was
dad
sad.
joke quota for the episode, perhaps.
Yeah,
So
it's we maxed that quote out. But ClearPoint, I feel when you go to their website, and again, you
yeah.
can go to ClearPoint neuro.com, and you
Mhm.
can see like, kind of a suite of products, and I feel like they can be establishing themselves almost like the intuitive surgical, but for the brain. On the
Right.
clinical side, they have a great clinical mode. So like real-time MRI guidance enables precision in drug delivery, biopsies, laser ablation, DBS. So that's, really, really valuable across multiple like neuro indications. And then finally, you know, again, like I don't get excited when companies raise a whole lot of money, but in a space like this where the costs are so high and
Mhm.
it's a really complicated market, the 110 million is going to give them like really serious room to commercialize, right? And potentially, here's the other thing, is that with that kind of money, how do they become a solid partner for pharma? Because
Mhm.
the problem with pharma right now is that, like, when you take a drug, okay, drugs, surprise, surprise, everybody, they don't have like a GPS. Like if you take a pill that's going to be for your brain versus for your liver, it doesn't know to go there. It just goes
Yeah.
all over your body, which is why you end up with side effects.
Mhm.
And so when pharma sees med device that create a solid delivery system, that eliminates all the issues with side effects. It improves drug efficacy. And you can even argue, depending on what it is, like, it's going to be higher margin, like you can take XYZ pill every single day with side effects, etc., for this amount, or you go through insurance, your insurance pays a little bit more, but then you get it done once, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there's a neuro drug delivery platform that can be used for that. Which, by the way, just I want to give, if I can, I give a teaser out real
Of course,
quick.
this is your show. You can do whatever you want.
There is a surgeon over at Johns Hopkins named Dr. Chad Gordon,
Mhm.
came on the show just recently. We haven't released that episode, but he essentially developed this thing called neuro reconstructive surgery at Hopkins. So essentially, you get like brain surgery done. Your scalp was deformed, and there's a whole stigma around it. So
Yeah.
he, developed this platform called Cranius Therapeutics from the ground up, where essentially what this thing is, and I'll show it here real quick. It's essentially this device that is, whoops, that's loud, implanted into the on the side of the scalp.
Mhm.
Okay, it has a couple of uh
Oh,
catheters,
fascinating.
yeah, that can go directly into the area of the brain that you
Right.
want. And then once it's sealed up, right, it's under the skin, temporarily, and you can insert in a syringe and essentially have your
Top it
your
off.
therapy delivered directly,
Yeah.
right? And the reason why that's important is that, again, whether it's Cranius or anything else, right? ClearPoint is going to help enable those kind of things to happen, because you're now able to get direct access to the brain. Like Cranius is another great example of that, where
Yeah.
the blood-brain barrier, I would say, was one of the biggest scientific obstacles of the century,
Mhm.
right? Which is, how does pharma cross the blood-brain barrier for better therapies? Well, med device is here to save the day. So that's sort of
Yeah.
a long monologue as to why, like, I was excited about ClearPoint.
No, it totally makes sense. One, that was the largest round that we saw this past month, and for good reason. The technology is exciting. Can't understate how important it is to bring real time guidance to such a precise area of surgery where traditionally it's all been done stereotactically. You have a patient move or anything, and you've got to reset up. Bringing in the real time MRI is exciting. It opens up, as you've just talked about, many opportunities to improve neurotherapies.
Totally. All right, let's do one more each. All right, you give me one more do you liked.
Okay, I'll stick to my cardiovascular roots. I really liked EBR. They have a leadless cardiac resynchronization therapy platform. I think the big plus there is getting rid of those leads so that they don't need to be replaced. They aren't going to break. They are less. The patient is going to be less prone to infection overall from those leads getting infected. So I love seeing technology that was originally implemented in pacing of the heart still stay in the heart, but now we're looking at bringing that technology into, what is it, the 60 million people worldwide that have developed heart failure, and population will continue to grow. So this is a great use of that technology. I love it. So that's the one that I'll give my shout out to.
All right. Mine is kind of shows a bias that I have.
Yeah, that's okay.
My bias, my bias is, blue ocean strategy, category defining things.
Sure.
And so I'm going to pull up the website here for a second as a reveal.
Okay.
Salvia Bioelectronics. Okay. So their technology is minimally invasive Neuromod system for chronic migraine. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you look on their website, the first thing you see, people with migraine deserve to reclaim their life. It's simple. It's direct. They're not doing this like crazy overarching, nonsensical vision statement where you're like, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah. What are they
so
doing?
Specific. And here's why I love that. Okay. Do you know like roughly how many people are affected by migraines? It's like over 1 billion people globally. All right. You have a migraine. What device do you use for that? I have no idea. So it's like, it's a super huge TAM, and there's like very low current penetration. So that's number one. And then the other side of it is this wave of, we've heard of pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals. There's this electroceuticals.
Yes.
Right? Salvia is using this Neuromod momentum with patient-friendly non-implant platform. So that I think is really, really interesting, right? And I think, for patients, they really, there's something to be said today about the consumer mindset in terms of their interest in medical devices and things that are going to improve their health, right? And, 60 mil, I think, I think is a good sweet spot. It's like not too much money. If they raise like, again, in the six figures or something, it's like way too much. But I think with 60 mil, that gives them plenty to do damage in the, in the market with commercialization, marketing, direct to patient, education. And so what I think is cool is that like neuromodulation, when we used to think about it, it's not just for like spine pain anymore. Now it's actually going after migraines, but with very minimal footprint and then like maximum upside. And the best part, sorry, pharma, but like I love non-pharmaceutical approaches.
Yeah.
I can't wait. Mark my words. What day is it today? May 29, 2025. I'm putting a stake in the ground. This industry will become $1 trillion industry in the next 5 to 10 years, and we will eat market share from pharma. And we're going to see pharma start to not just partner, but try to acquire med device. And that's going to make things really, really interesting, because you know what pharma does a really good job of? Acquiring things early when they're in clinical trials.
Yeah. No, I love the enthusiasm. I'm completely in agreement with you. I love anything that gets people away from lifelong pharmaceutical management. I think it's overall better for the patient, and love the shout out to Neuromod. So I'm a big believer in that industry, and we've seen some really interesting new technologies, as you've said, branch away from the traditional chronic pain management, motor skills for, I don't want to say small populations, but relatively small populations being served by these devices. Now bringing the technology, the learnings, and applying it to massive patient populations that could be better served.
Yeah. And, I set that up, just chef's kiss. Right?
Oh,
I set it up for the soft landing of our next segment, which is the category deep dive. We don't have to go that deep, but we're gonna go deep enough.
Yeah.
Is on Neuromod. Let me pull up these amazing graphics that LSI provided. So again, global Neuromod market share by supplier. We got Medtronic at a 42.8% market share. We got LivaNova at 7.4, Inspire 10.8, Abbott at 12.7, Boston Side 14.9, and then others at 11.4. So this is not an area where it's a highly fragmented market, but I think there's some opportunity here. Like for you, what do you think about when you see this?
Yeah, so this is coming from the neuromodulation webinar that we gave, I believe, last month. And great opportunity to look at this major, I would say, put it as like an up and coming major market. It's as resilient as something like cardiovascular devices, but it's really starting to enter into this next generation, is I believe the words that I used when I was giving the webinar. And that is because we're seeing these devices now being applied to different indications beyond what they were when they were initially incepted and brought to market 70, 60 years ago. So one things that stand out to me, if you look at major markets for devices, usually you don't see so many, I would say, major strategics in one place. And with decent market shares, all of these major strategics have a decent market share of this growing market. You also see some differentiation here. So Inspire is the one that I'll give the shout out to. Inspire has a device for sleep disorder management. It's coming back to the ResMed thing, kind of my comments on alternatives for managing sleep disorders. Inspire's doing it and they're crushing it. If you look at their balance sheet from the last few years, it's really impressive. So I love to see that. They came in, they brought in a new technology for a new indication that's thriving. And I think we're going to continue to see that here. So Boston Scientific, I believe they acquired Ray Cohen's business. They're going to come after, they're going to be coming after Medtronic in the, what is that, sacral nerve stimulation?
Shout out to Uncle Ray, man. He's been on a tear lately. I love it. I love it. We need more Ray Cohens, man.
Yeah, he's
that guy.
I love his talks, and he has a lot of wisdom that he can offer to the industry, small players, 100%. Large players.
100%. And just to kind of show it, there's some emerging players that LSI is watching. So we got SetPoint Medical, Synaptica Therapeutics, Neuromod, and Spark Biomedical. Again, I know you love all the companies, but like any one of these kind of stand out to you for any specific reason?
I'll answer that question, but first I'll just point out the fact that all of these companies, I'm like circling the screen with my mouse, even though you can't see it. All of these companies are not in chronic pain or motor skill indications. SetPoint is for autoimmune diseases. To answer your question, SetPoint is my favorite of these. I like that they've.
Wait, you ready? You ready for this? I have to show my screen. Okay. Look, what do I have up? Bingo bango. Yeah. We're on the same page, man. Same wavelength. Look at that. Dad jokes and all. Yeah, same here. I like SetPoint Medical. Tell me, why do you like SetPoint?
Well, for the reason that we both get excited about, which is developing an alternative to chronic or lifelong pharmaceutical management for a disease that has historically not been managed very well. So these autoimmune disorders, even if you can get a patient under control, it usually comes with severe side effects or quality of life reducing side effects. So I love to see the technology in medtech being used to regulate the body, regulate the autoimmune pathways, the inflammation pathway, excuse me. So really exciting company. They've had some backing from, I believe, Boston Scientific and Medtronic have both backed the company. So you've got some of the major strategics interested as well. That's always something that excites me, is what are the strategics looking at and actively investing in. So big fan of that. And all of those companies, really, 4 is not enough. It's fair to say that if you're in neuromodulation now and you're in this next generation of neuromodulation, it's going to be an exciting next 10 years for this type of technology.
Totally. Yeah. Same here. And again, like, when you look at like autoimmune, believe it or not, like I actually did my research as a Howard Hughes fellow long time ago at Hopkins and in autoimmunity.
Yeah.
And, autoimmunity is it's a very, very tough disease. And, the main approach to it is just throwing a lot of pharmaceuticals
Yeah.
at it. And again, not to hit on pharma, I mean, there's a lot of amazing drugs out there and
Of course.
therapies, but we have to have options,
Yeah.
so we I think seeing medtech move more into chronic disease and things like autoimmunity, where normally you see it being treated through pharmaceuticals, I think is exciting to see.
Definitely.
So, all right, and then kind of rounding things out, just strategic and structural shifts. I'm just gonna roll through these.
Okay.
The key trends, we got consumerized devices and strategic capital. So Medtronic exiting their diabetes business, which is a consumer D2C channel, just as continuous glucose monitors and insulin startups start to attract more capital, right? So that's one side. We see verticalized care pathways. So ResMed just kind of quietly consolidating things, developing that full stack sleep solution. As our GPT here, which has some good ones on time to time for our notes. The Epic for apnea. Oh, Chat GPT, come on. Yeah, I left that in the notes. I was making my own, so I was like, all right, Chat GPT, you get that one. That's a good one. And then finally, outpatient optimization. So surgical platforms like Oath, who just you mentioned the Rays, home and sleep diagnostics like VirtuOx, and then other things coming to market to really optimize that outpatient setting. Just because, let's face it, people post-COVID don't want to go to a huge hospital. They want to go to ASCs, and they don't want inpatient anymore. They want to opt for as much as outpatient as possible because, if you think, going back to our longevity and biohacking, think about it. What is the longevity in biohackers? They say they're like, stay away from like junk lighting, white bright lights, noise, everything. Think about what it takes to sleep in a hospital. You have terrible lighting. There's noise with alarms and monitors and everything like that. So like in an environment like that, it makes it more difficult to recover from any kind of procedure. So outpatient is the way, because I think your outcomes are just going to be better. And yeah, that's my take on all that. Any final thoughts from you?
Final thoughts are, it's been a good month, and I'm looking forward to episode number 3 next month, where we get to close out and look at Q2 for 2025, and we can kind of do a little bit of one things I love to do, which is just comparing how the year is going quarter by quarter here. So we'll have and then I believe a month after that, we'll be able to look at earnings and see how the major strategics. I'm just excited to continue to see where things go. I hope that the macroeconomic turmoil is coming to a simmer, or maybe even just coming off the boil. And we'll probably be able to comment a bit more about that when we recap next month.
Absolutely. For me, some final thoughts. On the strategic shift side, like aside from Medtronic, like divesting their diabetes side, seeing companies like Abbott, starting to take more of that continued glucose monitoring real estate, ResMed verticalizing more and more, trying to own sleep. And then, I'll give a shout out like to Carolina and InBrain. What I'm really excited about is innovation in the biomaterial space.
Yeah.
Right. So like InBrain being the first BCI using graphene. Right. So I think I'm really excited to see more companies and more importantly, like, university spinouts to find more interesting applications based on biomaterials. I mean, if you think about it, go outside of medtech, look at the automotive industry, the space industry, data, all, AI, all these things. There's so many interesting applications when it comes to materials, right? And material science, that if we bring into our industry, it's going to be fantastic. Like I don't know much about space, but I would imagine in the aerospace engineering side, there's all kinds of interesting materials that you can bring into medtech and make things better. So we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be, it's those intersections again of the different industries and finding the right people to take an idea and then implement it in another industry. So absolutely excited for what's to come ahead in this industry of ours.
Yeah, same here. Do you know what I'm even more excited about?
Is it dad jokes?
No. LSI Asia coming to you soon.
Yes,
So
that's true.
we're in the countdown. LSI Asia is happening. It's going to be happening on June 10th to 13th
Yeah.
in the Ritz-Carlton, Millennia, Singapore, my friends. I will be there. I'm getting on an extremely long flight. Don't worry. I booked that
16
business class
hours.
ticket because I'm not flying economy for that. Don't do economy for a long flight. It's just a bad idea. You don't want to make it more torturous. But I'm really excited about that. For those who are interested, go to lsiasiasummit.com, register to attend. It's the inaugural summit. And so I think for these inaugural ones, I mean, look, the inaugural
Something
LSI,
special.
yeah, it's very special.
Yeah.
It's very, very special. And so I cannot wait. And here's the other thing. For those who are, let's say, raising money, you're thinking about attending, it's going to be an optimal one to attend, because I'll tell you what, you know where the investors are not going? Outside, because it is going to be humid. You'll have to burn your clothing after being outside in Singapore in the month of June. So everybody's going to be inside for sure. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a dense networking week, or a few days, I believe. It's not a full week this time around, but yes, the inaugural events do have a special place in my heart. I have fond memories of our first European event, which had a very similar vibe to it. So looking forward to the conversations, the deals that are going to happen. If you're interested in learning a little bit about APAC before maybe attending LSI Asia, I'm going to be doing a webinar next week. I don't know if we'll see if this gets out before then.
I think this will be out. Yeah. They'll, if anything, catch the replay too.
Yes. So we're going to be talking data on the APAC region. I'm as excited as Omar is, if I'm not emoting it quite as excitedly as he is, for what's going to happen at LSI Asia. It's an exciting region, especially in the medtech industry, and we'll be talking about it during the webinar and at LSI Singapore in a couple of weeks here.
And last thing, and again, I don't mean to make this like a commercial. There's a reason why I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to do a partnership with LSI, because I think I'm the number one customer and consumer of your products. I got shout out to the team that's putting together the Lens magazine. I love it.
Yeah.
It's the only paid magazine subscription I own. And more importantly, aside from, shout out to you and the team as well, Nick. Great market reports. There's always this fantastic, like charts that show the deals that are going on and everything, but also just the coverage. Like this month, it was on the cover, it was Gary Guthart of Intuitive. I love this. It always gives me a pulse of the industry, not only of the deals that are happening, but like hires that are being made, where investment is going. It's pulse of the industry right here in your hand. So for those who are interested, go to lifesciencemarketresearch.com/magazine, sign up. They got a deal actually for your first year. So go take advantage of that. I just saw that on the website. So
we appreciate the shout out, Omar. And thank you again for having me on.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to next one.
That being said, be sure to give Nick Talamantes a follow on LinkedIn. Be sure to follow me. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm also starting to post more content on X. You can find me at Omar Khatib. .com. What am I saying? .com. At Omar M. Khatib. That being said, if you guys enjoyed this episode, forward this on to an investor, an entrepreneur, or somebody else in the medtech space. We grow the show because of you, the listener. This is the smartest audience in the industry because you guys listen to this show. So that being said, we'll see you all next time. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who'd really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.